As I get older, I like to revisit older movies that I'd watched decades ago. When you watch at such a young age, you miss out on a whole bunch, like little tricks filmmakers put in there or fun dialogue. It's why growing up, Kramer was my favorite on Seinfeld when the answer is obviously George. So for today's movie, I picked one that went way over my head when I first watched it. I'm talking about the infamous Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. When this movie came out, one publication literally printed that it was, quote, the gayest horror movie ever. Me, being a young kid, didn't realize any of what was going on, but watching it now, my goodness is it laid on thick. For decades, the writer of Part 2, Dave Chaskin, tried to blame the actor, Mark Patton, a closeted gay man at the time, for playing it, quote, too gay. Patton always said everything he did was right there in the script, including the interesting way he cleans his room.
And if there were any doubts before, there's this visual here, which, yeah.
It was only in 2010 that Chaskin finally admitted it was all intentional. He said he figured that his audience was just adolescent boys and homophobia would make the movie scarier, saying that tapping into that angst would give an extra edge to the horror. The 80s, man. The movie was a literal nightmare for Patton and made him pretty bitter. He eventually left the acting business altogether. He says he felt betrayed by the filmmakers because they knew he was gay. Eventually, he starred in the documentary Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, detailing his not-so-pleasant experience working on this movie. Chaskin has reached out to Patton to apologize over the years, but with varying success. And honestly, I don't blame Patton at all. As for the movie, I hated it when I was younger, and I think watching it now I'd upgrade it to slightly better than I remember. It takes place 5 years after the events of the first movie, and a new family has moved into the former house of Nancy Thompson, which, if you've seen a horror movie before, you know that's bad news. The teenage boy, Jesse, has been having nightmares since moving in, leading to my favorite scene in the movie where most of the family is eating breakfast, and all of a sudden they hear a high-pitched scream coming from upstairs. Now, you know this happens a lot because they don't even react to it. The sister just straightforwardly asks, Mommy, why can't Jesse wake up like everybody else? Later, we learn Freddy is actually inside of Jesse trying to break free. Another ham-fisted metaphor. He wants Jesse to kill for him while the teenager desperately tries to repress Freddy. Like I said, it's all very heavy-handed. What I hated about it forever ago, and what still really irks me today, is they completely changed up the rules set forth in the original. For one, nobody is killed when they're asleep. That's like the number one rule of these movies is Freddy gets you in your dreams. In order to kill Freddy, Nancy actually pulls him out of the dream world because then he's just a normal dude. In this one, at times, Freddy just decides to take over Jesse and kill people, at one point leaping out of the kids so he can murder a bunch of teenagers at a pool party. He even has his powers outside of the dream world too. None of it makes any sense. I think at this point in the series, they didn't know exactly what they wanted from their franchise villain. In fact, they hired someone other than Robert Englund to play Freddy. It wasn't until they had the new guy in a mask they realized it wasn't going to work. Could you imagine someone else playing him? People call New Line Cinemas the house that Freddy built. Now, there's a very good chance that production company doesn't exist today if they didn't come to their senses back then. As for what I liked, Robert Englund is great, of course. The first two dream sequences are pretty spooky, and Freddy cutting the seats of the bus as he walks to the people cowering in the back is incredibly effective. Plus, having Robert Englund play the actual bus driver is a fun little Easter egg. That's about it. It's an incredibly silly movie, highlighted by the fact that the power of love is what kills Freddy in the end. It was Robert Englund's least liked sequel, and Wes Craven, the director and creator of the original, turned down the chance to direct because he had major problems with the script. Like we mentioned earlier, Freddy completely changing his MO. He felt it lessened Freddy's menace to have him attacking a group of people who were all bigger than him, and a really bizarre scene involving a possessed parakeet that attacks the family, then explodes in midair without explanation. Yeah, that actually happened. In closing, it's interesting if you view it in a vacuum, but as part of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, it's really bad. Worse than the remake. Goofiness aside, it loses about 100 points for not having that creepy and iconic Freddy theme. 3 Dr. Chainsaws.